Yo, I'm Bob, into Star Wars, happen to be totally blind since birth, talking about The Acolyte Season 1, Episode 3, Destiny. This one premiered on June 11th in 2024. Spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the episode, I'd advise you to do that, otherwise you're going to get spoiled. However, if you don't mind spoilers, then that's perfectly okay too. You do you. That being said, jumping right in, and you were warned. So before the episode aired, I thought we were going to be focused on, I guess we could call them present day events in The Acolyte. But we get an episode long flashback telling of what life was like for young Osha and young May. And this takes place 16 years before the events of The Acolyte. And this one is all about witches, which, no pun intended, automatically makes me think of the courtship of Princess Leia and how the witches of Dathomir, not necessarily the Night Sisters in the expanded universe, but the witches of Dathomir, how they use the Force and how they view the Force. I think I tend to go back and, now that I can, of course, reread passages from the unabridged recordings of Star Wars Expanded Universe books because, when I was a kid, we just had the abridged versions, 2 cassettes long. But now, I'd gone back and I got to delve a little more deeply into how the witches would use the Force. Because in Courtship, in the Expanded Universe novel, not only are there Night Sisters who use night spells, that's what they consider the dark side of the Force to be, but there are also, run-of-the-mill witches of Dathomir. You don't necessarily have to be a Night Sister in order to be a witch. There were several different clans, because in the EU, the Night Sisters were created. They were formed because a Jedi had gone rogue. The other Jedi had exiled her, banished her to Dathomir. Her name was Alia. So she, had daughters, and they were taught to use the Force the way Alia used them. Night spells were forbidden, of course. But these witches here on Brendock, they remind me of some of the things that I read about in that novel. I'm sorry to kind of chase an EU rabbit, but I mean that I always make comparisons like that when I get into the new Star Wars stuff, because before the show premiered, we learned that Leslie Headland has been a pretty big fan of the Expanded Universe for years and years and years and years, as Darth Maul would probably say. So I like that we're kind of getting to explore what life was like for Osha and May. And I mean, the episode, it's pretty good. I was not expecting an entire episode long flashback, but right when we start the episode, you know things are going to go to blazes rather quickly, because you've got one sister, Osha. She feels like she doesn't belong in this coven. She's very uncomfortable with the upcoming ascension ceremony, and she just wants to be somewhere else in the galaxy. She feels like her place is somewhere else. And she's very uncomfortable with having to share everything with her twin sister. Whereas May, she wants to kind of delve into everything her sister's doing. I get the sense that it's just a little it's just a little unhealthy, because I mean, this kid is like, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? Why won't you share this with me? Why won't you share that with me? And I was just like, well, because I don't necessarily feel like I have to. I don't want to have to share everything I'm doing with you. I want my own journal. I want my own life. I want to kind of branch out and do what I want to do. So yeah, you've got all of these witches in their coven, and you get the sense that they're isolated from everyone else because the galaxy, well, it frowns upon witches. And I like that these witches aren't necessarily on Dathomir, because here in the new timeline, you get the sense that some of them have probably left Dathomir over the years. I don't know if we're ever going to get any background information on Alia in the new timeline of events. But I do like the idea that perhaps she could have been crucial in terms of how all the witches conduct their spells. So you've got the 4 Jedi that we're learning about in present day events, and they're here on Brendok, and they're observing events rather sneakily, and it's a given that the witches sense their presence, and I like that there is quite a lot of enmity between the Jedi and the witches. There's, I mean, we don't know what exactly happened, how it happened, but in the new timeline, the witches aren't too fond of Jedi, be they Night Sisters using night spells, if you want to call them that, or just run-of-the-mill witches in a coven like we see here on Brendok. Mother Quarrel is not as lenient with these two as Mother Anastasia is. And I think it's interesting that they have two varying methods of how to bring these kids up. One is like, the galaxy's a dangerous place. You are not to leave this fortress. Why did you run away? That's how Quarrel sees things. And then you have Anastasia, who's who dotes on them a lot. Even though they left, they're still going to get spice creams, and she doesn't really want to necessarily discipline them. So you got that little tense scene there. We see this tension building between May and Osha throughout the entirety of the episode. Even before the Ascension ceremony, you have these two kind of arguing about what Osha wants to do. May is very possessive of Osha, wants her to become a witch. She thinks, well, I want to become a witch. Why don't you want to become a witch? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't you want to share everything with me? She's hurt because she feels like her sister shouldn't be closed off to her. We have that little argument as their hair is being braided. You've got those two handmaid witches who are just kind of... The audio description track says they give each other a look as the sisters are arguing, as they're kind of, making their hair up, braiding their hair, doing whatever before the ceremony. And yeah, I got the sense that these two were kind of trading each other a look that probably said, oh boy, sister drama. Let's just, continue to fix their hair and just act like we're not here because, yeah, this kind of happens all the time. So I kind of like that scene a pretty good bit. And you've got that scene where Anastasia is talking about how these witches view the Force. They don't necessarily see it as an energy field. They kind of see it as a thread. I mean, it's still binding the galaxy together, but they see it as more of a thread to tug on, a thread to pull. And when you pull on that thread, it kind of affects everything around you, since it binds the galaxy together. So it's a different way to view the Force, but it reminded me of Luke talking to Tenennial Dio in Courtship of Princess Leia. When he was observing her chant and actually using words to channel her abilities instead of just using her mind. The Night Sisters, as well as the other witches on Dathomir, they would do some very flamboyant chanting, according to Tenenyo Dio, whenever they would try to heal, because you could force heal in the expanded universe. But yeah, I remember this one bit in the novel where Luke had healed Tenenyo in Courtship of Princess Leia, and she was kind of reflecting in her mind as to how flamboyant all the spell chanting was, and she felt like, to her it seemed like the witches were kind of doing it for show. She felt like it was a little over the top, and so whenever we got to the big ascension ceremony and you have the witches making those, hand gestures, they're chanting the power of one, the power of two, the power of many, my mind immediately went to what Tenenyo must have seen in the expanded universe timeline as, she would witness witches performing spells and conducting chants. And yeah, they would actually sing and chant, depending on, I think, the spells that they were going to cast. Well, they would call them spells, but they're, of course, another way of using this power that binds the galaxy together. So you got that scene where they're at the Ascension, and of course, May is not hesitant at all. She wants to become a witch. She wants to, give her life over to this coven. And little Osha, she is very hesitant. I mean, she is the antithesis of her sister. She is uncomfortable with this. She doesn't want to be on Brendok. She reminds me of so many other characters in the Star Wars galaxy. They don't really like where they are when they're young. They want to get out into the galaxy. They know there's something bigger out there. They know that they're supposed to be a part of something else. And they're just not happy with their station in life. And Osha strikes me as that kind of character. She doesn't want to be told how to live or how to think. I guess she kind of winds up being told how to live and how to think anyway, because, that's kind of what she does. She chooses to be a Jedi, but, she wants to, in a sense, make choices other than just being a part of this coven. So before Osha can get the little tattoo, according to the audio description, May's already got one. You've got the witches, and they sense that the Jedi are finally going to make their move. They've been watching them for days, and now you've got Sol, Indara, Kelnaka, and Torben, and they show up, and it's tense, but I like the scene. We don't see Jedi versus witches. We don't see things come to blows or anything. I love the chemistry between Sol and Osha here. He senses a lot of potential in her, and I like this one particular scene. I think it's Coral. She's very extreme in terms of what she believes. She says, well, the Jedi are here to take our children, and Sol contradicts her, and he says, no, the Jedi do not take children. And we know this from seeing how Anakin was given a choice to either leave Tatooine, after he was freed, after he won his pod race, or he could stay on Tatooine and be with his mom. And Qui-Gon never forced him into it. I don't think there was any manipulation involved. It's something Anakin chose, and Sol, 100 years before, he gives Osha that same choice. He's not like, you have to come with me, you have to become a Jedi. I don't think he manipulated her either. I think he set that choice before her. He asked her, would you like to be tested? Would you like to see if you could become a Jedi? And then you have things get a bit tense, because Torben is kind of controlled for a bit, and everything kind of goes back to normal, because I think everything's kind of smoothed over pretty quickly there. But yeah, it almost came to blows. So that was a pretty tense scene. I thought we were going to see a bit of action because everyone had bows and arrows, just like we see Night Sisters using on Dathomir. I mean, even though they're not Night Sisters, the witches still have those uh, bows. I would imagine they're probably energy bows. I don't know. Maybe they actually use arrows. The audio description track doesn't say, but I like that all of them have bows because I mean, if you're uh, a witch, I guess you probably have an energy bow. Really cool weapons though for these guys. So yeah, it is all smoothed over somewhat because OSHA decides to take the test, and you have Quarrel and Anastasia, and one is dead set against this. She wants to choose for OSHA. She's like, well, you're too young to make this choice. But then you have Anastasia who takes her aside and they're talking about it. And even though she doesn't want her daughter to leave, even though this is gonna break her heart, she allows OSHA to make her own choice. And she's like, is this really what you want? And OSHA says, yeah, I do want to be a Jedi. I want to take the test. And I mean, even though I think this really hurts Anastasia, I like that she has the courage and the strength to let go. And I think that is, something that, if you don't, let someone make their own choices, if you don't choose to, let a person walk down their own path, that could potentially lead to the dark side, because May is furious after OSHA takes the test, because they were told, well, you need to lie. Don't pass this test or you're going to leave. So you have OSHA who, she's taken the little test on the test screen like we saw Anakin do in episode 1. And she's asked to identify little images. The audio description track says that there's a Lothcat that flashes across the screen rather. And she identifies a different image entirely, and Soul knows that she's lying. And, he calls her out on it. And OSHA's uncomfortable with lying too. This is something that she doesn't want to do, but she doesn't want to. I mean, I got the sense anyway that she doesn't want to let her sister down. She doesn't want to let Quarrel down, and it's something that she ultimately decides to admit to Soul. She's like, yeah, I want to be a Jedi, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And he just says, you need to have the courage to tell the truth and say what you want. What do you want? This is what your sister wants for you. This is what Quarrel wants for you. They want you to stay here, but what do you want? And she does pass the test. And I like how May here, she is just livid. And it's understandable. She doesn't want her sister to leave. But she's giving in to her darker emotions. And I get why. She's been with her twin sister from birth, and it's change. It's something that May hadn't expected. It's big. It's life altering. May is used to them being together, but as a certain Star Wars character once said, you can't stop the change no more than you can stop the suns from setting. And May does not want things to change, just like a certain 9-year-old who left his mom to become a Jedi years later. She does not want things to change, but she goes to a bit of an extreme that Anakin, didn't go to when he was that young. I thought, and who knows, maybe it'll still happen, but I thought there was going to be more to that fire. I thought maybe OSHA was the one who potentially started it. I mean, I didn't call it or anything. It kind of flitted in and out of my head. I was like, oh, there's got to be something more to this fire. But when May confronts Osha in her in their chambers after the test, after Osha passes the test, May is like, you're not gonna leave. I'm not gonna let you leave. And Osha's like, well, yeah, I'm gonna leave. What do you think you're gonna do? And May's just like, well, I'm gonna unalive you. I can't say the big K word because YouTube doesn't like that. But I'm like, oh, so you were always kind of unhinged, weren't you, girly? And yeah, she just locks her sister in. Yeah, there's that scene where she takes the journal, she takes an oil lamp, and she's the one who starts the fire. And I'm like, oh, it's as simple as that, I think. I mean, only 3 episodes of the show have aired so far, and there could be more to the fire than we know. We don't see what the other Jedi are up to, but I mean, yeah, May is the one who started that fire. It spread very fast. There were so many bodies as things are kind of burning down around everyone, and you know, I like the part of the episode where they're arguing with each other as Osha's asking May, well, where's Mama? And May, she doesn't sound as upset as you'd think when she says, well, Mama's the D word, she's unalived. And Osha's like, what have you done? May comes back with, no, what have you done? You know, she's not willing to admit that her possession, her inability to let go has caused, you know, grief to the entire coven. I mean, as far as we know, everyone but these 2 are gone. Now, from what I've been seeing online, Quarrel's body wasn't seen. Maybe it was. The audio description didn't point it out. I see other fans say that, well, maybe she's still around. I don't know. I kind of hope that she is still around because this character, Quarrel here, she's something.
Okay,
so earlier in the episode, there's an exchange between Quarrel and Anastasia, and we are at present led to believe that these 2 were possibly, I say possibly because the show isn't over yet and we don't know, they were possibly brought into being via manipulation of the midichlorians. The same way folks have theorized Anakin had come into being, like, you know, the same way for years now. I don't know what I think about it because the show's not over yet. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions. But we know that Quarrel had carried the 2, and we know that Anastasia created the 2. We know that the Jedi aren't going to be happy with how these 2 were created. I'm thinking it might have something to do with a Faustian bargain with a certain Sith Lord who's big into creating life. I don't know how this is going to go. I really don't know. We know that Plagueis is around at this point. Now, in the new timeline, he's not given an age. We don't know when he was born. It just says when. It just gives us, you know, a date as to when Palpatine ended his master's life. Plagueis could be far older here in this particular point of the timeline. I know if we're going by EU timeline, Plagueis might be, well, he's considerably younger. I think he's 20-something at this point. But here, now, I mean, he could be older. For all we know, this could be part of him testing the limits of the Force. I don't know. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions because we don't know. Maybe maybe cloning is involved. I don't really know what, if any, answers were going to be given by the time the show ends. But I do hope that he might have been planting a few seeds if he is older at this point in the new timeline. I don't know. I like to think he's pulling some strings though. He could be far older, but yeah, you have the entire coven. As far as we know, they're lost. They've all passed on. Sans May, she's left behind. You have Soul, who whisks Osha away to their ship, and they leave for Coruscant. And there's one part at the end of the episode where Soul is just so compassionate for Osha, and he tells her, "You're never going to have to feel like this again." And the way he says it makes me think that, that there might have been a tragedy in his past that he failed to stop. He just, the way that he said it, there was such conviction in that. It almost made me think that he'd been through something, or he failed to stop something, because he's just so. He's got so much empathy for her in that moment when she finds out that Anastasia is gone. For all they know, May is gone too, and she feels like she needs to go back, but he just tells her there's nothing back there. We're gonna train you to be a Jedi. You can be my Padawan. He just immediately, swoops down and takes her under his wing, and I mean that's kind of how the episode ended. Rather, I wish the flashbacks could have been interspersed throughout the show, just because I was really wanting to see what was going to happen with Kalnaka at the end of episode 2. I wanted to see more of May on the hunt. I wanted to see more of the other Jedi racing to stop her. I wanted to see more of what Kamir was up to. But, I mean, it didn't infuriate me that we were focusing on this coven, on these two kids. It was a neat bit of backstory. I think it just kind of threw me for a loop a little bit. I thought we were going to maybe flashback forward a little bit throughout the episode, but we didn't really do that. I still had a pretty good time. There are some interesting new questions, some interesting new wrinkles, and I'm not expecting any answers as to how the girls were created in the show. Because that's the thing about Star Wars, be it new timeline, be it EU timeline, you're always left with more questions than you are answers. So you can do your own speculating, your own theorizing, and I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna get the answers by the end of the season. I hope a guy named Higo Damask shows up, and I hope that we're kind of let in on what he was working on. Maybe he was there whispering poison into the ears of both Quarrel and Anastasia. I don't know at this point. I'm just gonna let the show play out and see what happens by the end. I have no idea at this point. But hopefully next week we'll be in current events in terms of where we are in the show. I had a pretty good time with this one. I wish there'd been a bit of action here, but I love the crazy chanting. I remember this one when you had Anastasia. She was talking about how they were exiled. You had this one random woman start cackling, immediately cackling right when Anastasia was talking about how they were almost extinct, how they were driven to extinction. And I was like, that's not funny. What are you doing randomly cackling there? It reminded me of going to a church and you've got the Grand Poobah pastor trying to deliver a a message or a speech, and you've got that one person who's always like, yes, in the background, agreeing with everything that he says. Whereas here, you've got this random witch who's just spontaneously cackling. And I'm like, lady, come on, man. Yeah, this is serious. What are you doing? Are you filled with the dark side? I like that, though, because it kind of adds to the weirdness of the scene of the ascension ceremony there. It kind of reminds me of a Sage Ventress in the Clone Wars. Like sometimes whenever she would duel, or whenever she was kind of sneaking around, she would do that really insane kick butt witch cackle too. So it reminded me of a Sage later on in the timeline. So that was one part of the episode that really cracked me up. I like that a lot. I hope there's nothing that I've forgotten. If so, I'll have to bring that up in future episode reviews. But I mean, pretty good. I think I liked the first two episodes a bit better as a whole, but I mean, that doesn't detract from me having a good time with this episode. I really liked getting to see inside this coven and knowing that not only are there Night Sisters, there are other witches. Well, we find that out too in Tales of the Empire, which I probably should get around to reviewing at some point. I've already watched it twice, but yeah, that's a little series of animated shorts that goes a bit more into just a little bit more into other witches in terms of the new timeline. Anyway, until next time, I don't know what the title of episode 4 is, so we'll be talking about whatever that one is. Hopefully this will be published before episode 4 airs. I've finally caught up with these. So, may the Force be with you, and until then.